Oh, there we are.
Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting while others join, because people are constantly appearing in the lobby at the moment, and we'll get underway very shortly. But if, as a housekeeping, just please remain on mute. There'll be chance for questions later, which I'll go through when everybody's in. But if you just remain on mute, that'd be great. Thank you. It's nearly 5 past, so I'm going to get going. So welcome everybody to the annual members meeting. I'm Andy Field and I'm the chairman of the trust, and I'll be guiding you through today. As I say, just a few housekeeping points first. What we'll be doing with questions is when we get to the end, we'll tackle any questions that have been submitted in advance first. And then as we go along, if you want to put questions in the chat, do feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll deal with those second. And then finally, providing we've got time, we will take live questions. So that's the way we'll do that. Please do save your questions up until the end, and then I will do an MC role with the questions. The other point we just want to make is on some of the slides you will see photographs where people are not wearing masks and are not social distancing. That's because those photos were taken pre-pandemic. So it's not that we've been ignoring infection protection control. It's just that some of the photos are pre-pandemic. So without any further ado, I think we will, if we could start the slides, please. And if we move on to the next slide. So this is a snapshot of what it was like last year. This is taken from our annual report. And in the next slide, when we get there, you'll see the effect of the pandemic, because last year was by no means a normal year, as we all know, personally, professionally, and everything else. So we have been very busy though with serving our 410,000 local residents, and you'll see even in the pandemic we had something like 31,500 emergency admissions. We of course kept on helping deliver babies with over 3,000 babies there, and seeing a lot of people in our A&E department. And you'll also notice our financial turnover going up, now hitting 387 million last year. And the final thing I'd like to highlight on this slide is the virtual clinics, and we'll come to those on the next slide. So if you give me the next slide, please. So this is the impact of the pandemic, and you'll hear a lot more about this because as a result of the pandemic, of course, we are now dealing with far more than these. So you can see we had a 20% reduction in A&E attendances over that year. That is very much not the case now, and you'll get the sense of where we are now later. You'll see that because of the pandemic, we really had to increase our intensive care beds, and actually went up from 13 to 31 at one stage. And the implications for staffing of that were immense. We brought in volunteers, some people who'd come back to practice. We had people seconded in to our intensive care. Clinicians that weren't used to working in intensive care, worked in intensive care and did a great job. But that intensive care capacity up to 31. Emergency admissions, a slight reduction, but if that hides, of course, that a lot of those emergency admissions were COVID, with all the implications that that has. You'll see vaccinations appear for the first time, and over 25,000 vaccinations. That's not just our staff, of course, but a lot of our partners' staff, social care staff, council staff, and indeed members of the public at various times as well in our Vaccination Hub, which was really very successful. Day case procedures, you will see, dropped, as did elective planned admissions for surgery, dropped. And of course, this again has big implications for where we are today. And you'll all have read in the papers on waiting lists for outpatient appointments and waiting lists, especially for elective surgery. And again, we'll cover that later. But in the year in question, we had to reduce those drastically in order to cope with the COVID pandemic. And you'll see a huge increase here in virtual clinics. Now, by virtual, we mean both telephone and video. It's not all video, but again, it was a way of making sure that the most urgent people were seen, were triaged, and then seen if necessary, so that the business of the trust could go on. So could I have the next slide, please? So what about our services? So we show this every year, but it's changed this year, because what we did during the pandemic was we split our sites into green site and red site. So St. Peter's obviously carried on urgent and emergency care, but that was our COVID site. And we were very, very fortunate to have two sites, and those trusts that did not have two sites really struggled with COVID infections caught in hospitals. But splitting the site together with strict infection control procedures helped us actually to be one of the top performers in terms of infection protection and control. So you'll see that Ashford, there, more day case surgery gone there, more elective surgery gone there, more outpatient clinics gone there. And we're happy to discuss that later, of course, and indeed an outpatient midwifery hub, which I think was very, very welcome. And there is no doubt about it that splitting the sites like this and having a green and red site saved lives. And again, we would be happy to discuss that later. So those are our main sites, but if we have the next slide, please. Woking is an increasingly important site for us, and we have plans for Woking in terms of we've bid for money for more diagnostic services to happen in Woking. And again, we're happy to cover that in any questions. We've always had our inpatient neuro rehab bed there, but outpatients and physiotherapy. And then you'll see a whole heap of specialist clinics within the community. And the ones I'd like to highlight really are the Runnymede and Woking physiotherapy clinics, where we've actually moved outpatient physio into the community at Egham Orbit, at the Runnymede in the Riverbourne Club in Chertsey, and into Woking. And this has been hugely successful. Again, we're happy to take questions on that, but it's basically people being dealt with in a non-clinical environment, physios having access to the latest sort of gym equipment, and people really benefiting from the side benefits of joining a gym perhaps, or membership of the gym, and really very, very successful move into the community of some of our services. So that's a big picture painting of what happened in the last year. You'll hear a lot more about that from Suzanne in a moment, and from Danny, who's going to lead on from me. But I just wanted to give you that big picture, how our services are now doing and what the effect on our various services of the pandemic was in percentage terms. So I'll now hand over to Danny. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. I'm Danny Sparks, Lead Governor and Public Governor for Runnymede, Surrey Heath, Windsor and Maidenhead. Next slide, please. NHS Foundation Trusts are not-for-profit public benefit corporations established under the Act that you can see. Foundation Trusts have a public membership, a council of governors and a board of directors, and the board runs the trust. The role of the Council of Governors: we're authorised by statute with these duties: to hold the non-exec directors to account for performance, to represent the interests of the general public, that includes patients and members, and we agree and approve certain large transactions, we appoint the Trust's external auditors, and we appoint the non-exec directors, including the chair, and we agree remuneration. We have three governors from Elmbridge, 2 governors from Hounslow, Kingston and Richmond, 3 governors from Runnymede, Surrey, Heath, Windsor, 3 governors from Spelthorne, and 3 governors from Woking and Guildford. And you can see their pictures in front of you. We also have staff governors and appointed governors. We have 5 staff governors from various regions throughout the hospital, and the appointed governors are from Royal Holloway, University of Surrey, Runnymede, Spelthorne and Woking Borough Councils. And again, you can see their pictures there. How we have fulfilled our role. We have endorsed the chairman's and non-exec directors' appraisals. We've appointed 1 new non-exec director and 1 associate non-exec director. We've reappointed a non-executive director, and we've held the non-exec directors to account via governor, non-exec director meetings. We have also contributed to the priority in the Trust's quality account. So you see, we don't just sit there doing nothing. We are in the middle of governor elections this month. There will be an Elmbridge by-election, a Spelthorne by-election, Runnymede, Surrey, Heath, Windsor and Maidenhead are voting for 3 seats, and the rest of England is 1 seat. And as you see, the staff, we are voting for, the hospital are voting for 1 seat for ancillary admin, 1 seat for medical and dental, and 1 seat for the volunteers. And we wish to express our gratitude for those governors that left the council over the past year. Tom Allen, Neil Adolphus, Sinead Mooney, Rose Chandler and Iftikhar Chowdhury. It was with great sadness that we learnt of Bertie's sudden death in January. She was public governor for the constituency of Elmbridge and had been a governor from December 2016. Bertie was very generous in her gratitude for Trust staff, and being a retired nurse herself, she appreciated the pressures they were under, especially more recently with the pandemic. Bertie was enthusiastic, hardworking, often being first in line to volunteer for any additional membership activities, whether it be fun or serious. She had a wonderful sense of humour and often bringing some much needed light-heartedness to discussions. She will be continued to be missed by all, especially by her governor colleagues. She was very colourful, and I might say that she always hated that photograph. Thank you. And I now say farewell myself. I have been a governor for 7 years and lead governor for 3.5 years. And up until 18 months ago, this took up a fair amount of my time. Since first lockdown in March last year, I have felt bereft. I was used to attending various meetings in the hospital and learning what was happening face to face. I am incorrigibly nosy. I have missed the face-to-face meetings and the camaraderie of my many friends, governors, executives, and Ashford St. Peter's staff. Apart from having my children in the maternity unit, as it was then, just as it was opening, Ashford St. Peter's has been a part of my life since 1983, when I joined the then chest office. It's now respiratory medicine. And I worked for the same consultant for well over 30 years. I can honestly say that I have loved almost all of my time here. I'm proud to have been a member of Team Ashford St Peters, and thank you for allowing me to be part of making these hospitals so successful. I send my successor every best wish and say that never ever be afraid to make yourself look foolish, to make people smile. When you make people smile, they will remember you. And I might suggest that a degree in herding cats might be useful. So good luck, and thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Danny, and I'd just like to add my thanks to Danny for a tremendous stint as a governor, and of course that long and distinguished career with the Trust. You've been tremendous, and we will miss you, and we will lose a bit of colour and fun, I think, as you leave us. But huge thanks to you for all you've done, Danny.
Thank you very much indeed.
I'm now going to hand over to our Chief Executive, Suzanne.
Thank you, Andy, and I just would like to add my thanks to yours to Danny. Danny, you've been a significant support throughout my time here at Ashford St Peters, to me and to the wider team, and very much to the front line as well. So thank you for everything that you've done. And as I said, you'll never be a stranger at Ashford St Peters.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. And this is an opportunity for me to say hello to you all and welcome you to this important statutory meeting, and to share with you one or two reflections on the last year before we get into some presentations of more detail from my executive colleagues. So next slide, please. So who would have thought when we sat here this time last year and reflected on a very difficult year, that the difficult year to come was yet to be fully understood or to be realised. I certainly didn't anticipate that I would be sitting here talking to you today, thinking very seriously about heading into our third winter as a team in responding to the ongoing COVID pandemic. And I think this picture paints a picture of a team that are amazing. And I can just pause one moment to thank my incredible colleagues, both those sat here this evening, but also those who have continued to provide absolutely outstanding care and respond to an unprecedented situation. And it's without doubt that I can share with you that last January and February and into March, I know those months happened. I don't actually remember the detail. It was that an extraordinary a time. And the people that you see in the images in front of you there are smiling and they've got their thumbs up, but it was a really very difficult time. And Andy's giving you some of the stats around how many patients we were supporting. And through that time, at one point, I think we had over 300 patients, COVID patients in the hospital. 65 or more of those were requiring either intensive care or very high intervention respiratory support care, all of which placed an absolutely extraordinary demand on our team. And so I think it's really important that we just recognise that. Now, what we are now facing is a slightly different situation. And we'll get onto some of the detail of our approach to that. We aren't anticipating a winter quite so significantly impacted with COVID pressures, but there's no question at all that the levels of demand on our organisation remain absolutely intense, and everybody is having to continue to work extremely hard to maintain our resilience and our ability to respond. And I'll come on to that next. Next slide, please. So in that context, I think there's been a great deal of effort from myself, the board and the executive team placed on how do we sustain Team ASPH in the face of this unrelenting demand and very challenging scenario. And we've got on the slide there one or two of the things that we've been doing in order to support members of our team. You can see across the top of that slide the banner, A Year to Remember, and I hope you can see my COVID star medal, which I am wearing with great pride. And the top picture in the left-hand corner of the slide, you can see two members of our team who just this week have been receiving their COVID star medals, which we have commissioned from an internationally renowned artist and sculptor, Harry Gray, specifically for the team here at Ashford St Peters, alongside a yearbook that they've been receiving, which is a photographic and narrative reflection on the year that we've had together. So something that they can cherish and reflect on over time. And Andy, myself and other members of the executive team are spending this week personally meeting every single member of the team if we can, presenting them with their medal and their book and explaining why we've taken the time to do that in such great detail. And I can share with you that the response from the team has been absolutely amazing. Some of them can't quite believe that that we're spending time with them in that way. Some of them feel they don't deserve acknowledgement and reward and recognition in that way. And so for us, it's a great opportunity just to say, no, you absolutely do. And it's a pleasure to be able to share this with you. You can also see in the slide, in the bottom two pictures on either side of the slide, some images of our very newly opened team ASPH Health and Well-Being Hub, which the first facility associated with that has now opened on the St Peters site. You can see there the lounge area, which we've spent a lot of time furnishing to a very high standard in order to create a relaxing space for the team to, if you like, take a break away from the working environment and spend time with colleagues, grab a coffee, do some online shopping. No patients allowed in this facility. This is just for the team. And then on the other side of the slide at the bottom, you can see, I think, the gym that has now opened. It's been furnished with support and equipped with support from some charitable donations alongside some of our own investment. And that has really been taken off. People are really down there getting into the induction and using it. And then you can also see, I think in the images there were quite small, some of the work and support we had during the pandemic. I think that is Nourish Our Nurses, possibly. And we had support from British Airways to provide kind of time out, business class lounge facilities. They would make a coffee, they would provide support. So absolutely extraordinary levels of support there. So focusing on looking after our team has been a really key piece of work for myself and the board and my colleagues. Next slide, please. And this speaks to the same piece. So where we have had the opportunity, we have taken it to celebrate the extraordinary achievements of our colleagues. And there are just one or two slides here, and I won't speak to all of the pictures, but we have recently had our staff awards ceremony, and you can see some images from that, where we took time to celebrate nominations that were made across the team. So these were nominations made by members of the team, 4 members of the team. That was a great event to sort of acknowledge the contribution of so many. You've got images there of both the Chief Midwife of England and the Chief Nursing Officer of England, who came to present members of our team. Hannah and Fiona are beaming at us from the centre of this slide there with their Chief Nursing Awards, which is a very prestigious award, and it's a very great honour that we're able to celebrate that with them. And we also had New Year's Honours Awards held earlier in the year. So, you know, where the pandemic has allowed, it's been important to identify and celebrate the contribution of members of our team, and we've really tried hard to do that. And this is just a couple of examples. Next slide, please. Another very important piece of work, which we have brilliantly sustained, I believe, through this pandemic, is our work to deliver our electronic patient record. This programme is called Surrey Safe Care, and as you will know, we're delivering a single instance application across Ashford St Peters in partnership with the Royal Surrey County Hospital. And this image depicts some of the things that we've been able to achieve despite the pandemic. So one of the very important things that we had to do was something called a future state validation. And now a future state validation requires a very high level of engagement. It's an opportunity to show, if you like, the kind of systems, the patient pathways to members of the team and start to check with them, does that look right? What needs to be amended or changed? And so engagement across that was very important. You can see the dates of the engagement were the back end of February, and we were absolutely in the peak of the winter pandemic at that point. But despite that, with Simon's leadership, you'll hear from Simon later, we were able to generate engagement of more than 4,000 members of the team across the 2 sites to take part in a series of virtual discussions around, what they were feeling around the Surrey Safe Care programme, what their observations were of what we shared with them, and created actually a very high amount of energy and enthusiasm. And at quite a dark time for the organisation, this did create a really great opportunity to think about something different from the pandemic, to think about an opportunity for improvement and development, and to have a ray of light, if you like, that was about something new and improving, and I think we all really welcomed that. And of course this programme continues. We've reached a very important milestone today, but I won't steal Simon's thunder with regard to this, and we're working hard through the pre-deployment phase now and anticipate a go live of this really important programme for us early in the new year. Next slide, please. This is my personal favourite highlight of last year, the Vaccination Hub. Over a period of around 3 weeks back in January, a whole team of people from right across Ashford St Peters came together to set up our Vaccination Hub, and just an extraordinary effort. I'm not going to talk about the workforce because I know Louise is going to talk about that later, but it's a really great example of partnership working. So from my point of view, this team came together at a very difficult time, and you can see the figures there. Since then, they have administered almost 27,000 doses of COVID vaccine. And I would say this was the single most significant intervention over that time. This saved lives. This absolutely did. Saved members of the team, saved members of the community, and actually created a place of high energy and enthusiasm. And it was a real morale boost when we needed it so very badly. So you can see there, I awarded the team that put the hub together the Chief Executive of the Year award, which went out to something like 150 members of the team because there were so many involved. But I think they really, really deserve that award. And, I can't thank them enough for what they did over that time. And of course, more recently, and continue to deliver the 3rd doses as we speak. Next slide, please, which I think is my last. And of course, we continue to do all of the important work that you would imagine us to be doing to generate new facilities and modern infrastructure. And there's just a few examples on the slide here. So in the top left-hand corner, you can see an inside view of our new urgent and emergency care centre. And I hope you can see from that image the quality of the internal environment that we're creating here. Really seeking to break the rules and ambitions around what an NHS and clinical building would look like. And certainly we are getting great feedback from both the team and patients from the new environment that they are receiving care in. You can see our car park there, and actually you can see how, a few months down the road from opening, it's starting to blend into the surrounding environment with the greening methods that we've taken there. More work to do, but our ambition is that ultimately, it will almost disappear. Some of us wish that more than others, I think, but it's been an absolutely extraordinary benefit to the team. People have, regularly stopped me in the corridor and say, thank you for the car park. So, it's been a morale booster there. Top right-hand corner, you can see our new Stimulation Suite, which is an absolutely fabulous piece of technology, integrated technology that enables multi-professional training in a clinical setting. But as you can see there, that isn't a real person and they aren't actually in an intensive care unit. So it's a safe space to practice really technically advanced skills and to enable teams to come together. And then finally, in the bottom corner there, you can see Chestnut Ward, which is our new pop-up intensive care ward, which is being filled with patients as we speak, and gives us that surge capacity to provide critical care to patients when they need it. So just a few examples there of infrastructure improvements that we've been able to achieve despite the very, very challenging circumstances. And I will conclude there and be ready to answer questions later in the presentation. Back to you, Andy.
Thank you, Suzanne. So we now want to hand over to Tom Smerdon, who's going to cover the work we've been doing and are continuing to do on our strategy refresh. Tom.
Thanks, Andy, and good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all. Last summer, as we kind of just got over wave one and we're having a bit of a breather, we took some time out as a board to say, is our strategy the right strategy for this situation? And it didn't take us long to determine that it was pretty much the right strategy, but we knew that it needed to be updated and to change because clearly COVID and the pandemic and the work that we were doing reorganising the services across the hospital was pretty profound, and we knew that the strategy needed to be refreshed as a result of all of that. And of course, since then we've seen new NHS policy, we've seen a new white paper, we're expecting to see new legislation coming forth from next year, and so we decided about a year ago to embark on the strategy refresh process. It took us a bit of time to get started with that because then wave two came along, and although we wanted to start in December last year, we didn't really start in anger until after Easter. But since then we've had a number of amazing conversations with many of you actually who've been supporting us through this process, and I and colleagues have met a number of you. Unfortunately, all through Teams, we haven't been able to pull together a kind of face-to-face event that we were hoping we'd be able to do that. But despite not being able to do that, we've had some really good quality conversations with about 300 people actually overall, members like you, public members, some of our staff members, and a range of people that we work with as partners, as other stakeholders within the work that we do across the health sector, across local authorities, the voluntary sector, primary care, etc., etc. And some of these have been general about our strategy, and some of them have been kind of focused on particular parts of our strategy and our strategic objectives. We've also put a survey out there. We've had something like 200 responses to that survey now. It's still out there, so anybody who hasn't had a chance to go onto our website and complete the survey, there is still time. So I really would encourage you to do that. And we've also been publishing and encouraging that survey to be completed by members of the public. In fact, I think Andy from Radio Way is with us tonight, and Andy interviewed me just last week. As part of our campaign to encourage members of the public to engage with us in this and to put their views in. And we've had some great responses. We've just started the process of processing all of those and putting work into the refresh strategy, and reading through them, there's some fantastic responses. What we found is, in general, there's some really good support for our strategy, and that, broadly speaking, it's the right strategy still. Although it doesn't say COVID in it at the moment, and it doesn't talk about the changes to the NHS, it does talk about collaboration, and it does talk about quality of care, and it does talk about experience. So much of it is right. but clearly things have changed. And what you've been telling us is that the communication that we exercise as a trust to members of the public and to patients could be improved, and the way that we present ourselves could be improved, and the information that we provide about the services that we offer and how they're changing could be improved. And you told us also that accessibility of services is a really important aspect that we need to pay attention to, and included within that is the whole issue of virtual clinics, and we need to make sure that we get those right in the mix of care delivery in a way which balances convenience, but also make sure that clinical quality and the experience of service is not impaired as a result. So we're putting all this into the machine at the moment, and we're going to be coming back out to people. Actually, we want to make sure that our interpretation of what we've been told is right. So in December, we're going to be having another couple of sessions with people who we've talked to. So please do look out for those and come along, and you can tell us whether we've understood right and we've got it right in the refresh strategy that we will be publishing in early in the new year. So that's been our journey so far. Thank you to everybody who's been involved and helped us with it. As I say, there is still time to complete the strategy, and I think the link or some instructions have just gone into the chat. So that's all for now. Happy to take questions later on that. I'm not sure whether I'm handing back to Andy or handing over to Andrea, who's got the next slide.
Oops. I think, yes, you were going to go through the strategic objectives.
I am indeed.
Great,
Andy.
There
So hi everyone, warm welcome this evening, and good to see you all. So for those who don't know me, I'm Andrea Lewis, Chief Nurse at the Trust, and I'm going over this slide, which is to really to illustrate our first strategic objective, which is the quality of care. And this very much aligns with the quality priorities that we set each year to give the best quality care that we can to our patients. And some of those highlights, those quality priorities I've identified here on the slide. So I'll just go through them individually and just give some examples really of where, our approach to this and where we've done those improvements around those quality priorities. And the first one is about strengthening our approach to harm-free care. Now, during the last year, clearly still being within the pandemic, harm-free care became a really, really key focus, and this is about really reducing harm to our patients. And the key areas of focus around this are about preventing tissue damage to our patients, preventing any venous clots, preventing falls, particularly repeated falls as well, and then really promoting and assessing the nutrition status of our patients. And this is particularly around nutrition and also hydration to prevent malnutrition and dehydration, which very much do have an influence on the other harms that I just mentioned around tissue damage, clots and falls. Had a big focus on that, and the teams have done some really great work around it, and we've seen some improvement around those areas, which has been good. The other point is about becoming a learning organisation, and this is a golden thread through our quality of care objective, and that's been a challenge during COVID with regards to getting people together to really share the learning. But we've embraced the virtual platform around this, and the virtual events. We've put on more virtual events during the last year, which actually has encouraged more people to attend, which has been brilliant, and has been a great success both internally and externally on the shared learning piece. And we've also had plays that we've had recorded with some key prominent actors around certain issues that we've had within the trust, particularly themes that have come out through our complaints. And one of the plays that we held was very well received by staff, actually, as a learning event, and staff felt that it was very tangible in being able to get that learning, and we're going to promote that even more so over the next year. And then the bit I'd like to just highlight about learning is very much with our maternity, and we've done with our maternity and our women and our service users. We've done lots and lots of engagement here, and it's great to see that we've had super feedback around that, and the engagement is only increasing. So a big shout out to our maternity team who've really embraced that and have brought in our co-design with our women and the service users around that. The other area areas improving discharge process, and the area I'd like to really highlight here that we've done quite a bit of work on is internal discharge process. It has been a key feature in our complaints, and it's about getting it right around our discharging of patients. Still got a lot more work to do, but we have done a lot of work around improving discharge with using a discharge checklists, which sounds very simple, but actually is effective. So when a patient's getting discharged, having a checklist that we absolutely cover off to make sure everything's been done. Also, the issuing of discharge welcome packs now when a patient's admitted, and it clearly articulates, what a patient should expect with regards to their discharge, and that we're starting the discharge process on a patient's admission as well. And also the utilisation of our discharge lounge, because we have a better discharge lounge now. We've got a new location which is lovely, and so it's promoting the use of that discharge lounge for patients moving from the wards to the discharge lounge before they then go home or to their place of home as well. The next point is around dealing with issues and complaints, and our patient experience team have been very active around this. And have been engaging with the clinical teams to address issues and complaints either patients have had or relatives have had. And areas that we really have had a focus on in this last year, I have to say, is around visiting. It has been a prominent feature within our complaints and issues. And I can understand that, because obviously we have restricted visiting due to the pandemic. But we have now relaxed visiting, and particularly in the last sort of 4 or 5 months, to enable relatives to come and see their loved ones, and that has really gone down well, and has enabled also relatives to be able to get updates on their loved ones when they come to the ward on progress and issues, etc. And as a consequence of that, our complaints have gone down around that, which is good to see. And obviously we're keeping a review on the visiting in light of the situation with COVID and infection rates, but we've still managed to keep that open at the moment on a more relaxed basis, very controlled. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to our volunteers team who have been manning the phone line around booking for relatives to be able to book appointments to come in to our trust to visit their loved one. So it's in a more controlled way. The last bit is around the research, the contribution that we've had to research and development through the pandemic, and that's been really active through our clinical research trials. And one of the areas I'd like to just highlight is our contribution to the Siren study. And this initially at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, this was around the doing research with individuals on the presence of COVID and the antibodies actually that individuals had who'd had COVID-19. And this was really to determine the protection or the someone who'd been infected, what protection they had. And this then expanded onto the vaccination as well, and then testing people with regards to the vaccination that they'd had, and then the efficacy of those vaccines too. So we're very proud to have been part of that actually, and as I said, it's been really active, and long may that continue that we do that. So they're the key areas I really just wanted to bring out really around our quality of care objective. Quite a lot going on. It's only touched the surface really, to be honest, what I've just pulled out, but really active and looking forward to this year to improve on those as we go forward. Thank you, Andy.
And thank you for that, Andrea. And we're now going to move on to our people strategic objective, and I'll hand over to Louise.
Thanks, Andy. Obviously, Suzanne's already touched on a number of things in relation to the support that we gave to our workforce, but also the kind of the focus that we've given around, in particular, well-being, and making sure that that is one of the most important things strategically that the organisation has an eye on. A couple of things just to pull out then. The first is just the description of the opportunity that we took this year to really think differently about how we could encourage people from our local communities to come and work for us. And I guess my reflection is this time last year, I would have been talking to you about some of the initiatives such as Bring Back Staff, which was around mobilising people that maybe had retired or had gone into other industries and finding a way in which we could bring them back into the NHS. And if I'm honest, we weren't particularly successful with that. So we really needed to think about a different approach to finding opportunities to increase our pipeline of people that would work and support us. And we created a recruitment hub and thought about a completely different approach to how we would do that. And we had a real eye on people in places like the airline industry and the retail sector and the other service sectors where their jobs and their opportunities for paid employment had completely changed because of lockdown. And we created a recruitment hub that enabled us to go out into those networks and find opportunities for people to come and work for us. In the first instance, most of them were coming to join our bank, so that's where we employ our temporary workforce. But subsequently, we have been able to convert quite a lot of those people into full-time and permanent health and social care roles. So that's absolutely fantastic. But just as a kind of indication around some of the figures, by the time we'd got to the end of this financial year, so sort of March, April time, we'd recruited and deployed more than 160 people that were completely new to the NHS that had come in since November last year. 97 of those were in the Vaccination Hub. But actually, since we then closed the Vaccination Hub, they've then been deployed onto places like the community vaccination hubs. They've worked in the organisation as ward clerks. They've gone on to work in our labs, and we've really kind of used that new pool of workforce to increase our numbers in places like our virology for our MLAs and our healthcare assistant workforce. So it's been a really good story of offering opportunities for our local community where furlough or unemployment was a real issue and would eventually have an impact on their health and well-being, and being able to offer them opportunities for work. So really pleased about that. And we've extended the recruitment model recently to make use of this technology. So a virtual open day with a Q&A for midwifery assistants then generated quite a significant pool of applicants. We've done that for phlebotomists. So, people who don't know what a phlebotomist is, how do you get into that? What training could we give you? And again, it's generated a Q&A through Teams, has then generated quite an increase in applications. And I've already given you the example of virology. So certainly finding ways in which we access communities that wouldn't normally apply to come and work for us has been a real, I suppose, a real benefit of the last few years, and this in particular using video conferencing as a way of extending our reach. I think, Suzanne has talked to you about the well-being, and obviously I am personally cock a hoot that we've now got our Well-Being Centre open. It's been at least 2 years in the making. I've made lots of promises that I've not been able to keep in terms of timescales, but we're now open, and it's just fantastic to see people using it. But we've also done a huge amount to try and support our colleagues in terms of well-being over the last 12 months, including working with a dedicated psychologist, so people have an opportunity to talk to a psychologist on a one-to-one basis, having on-site pastoral support that is going out into departments, so it's not really just about expecting people to come to you, but it's actually an outreach service where we're really going in and finding out how people are and offering them an opportunity for a chat. And Lawrence developed something called the Well-Being Wagon. So he would go out with a trolley, and on his trolley he'd have goodies, hand cream, other toiletries, drinks, biscuits, and he'd go out and talk to members of staff about how they were feeling, and that kind of interaction in a very informal way then enabled him to signpost people to other opportunities for support where he thought that was necessary. Suzanne's talked about Project Wingman. That was a brilliant initiative from the airline industry to support the NHS during the pandemic, and we made full use of that this year. They came in providing the first-class pop-up lounge facility, I think is the best way to describe it. And just offered people an opportunity to have a cup of tea and a chat, which our staff really needed during those difficult times. And then finally, Surrey and Borders were working with the whole system on some interventions which they describe as the Resilience Hub, so that people can access, as I've already said, psychological support on a one-to-one basis, or as teams. And one of the things that we did do this year was we took our critical care teams, so both those that worked in ITU, but also those that worked in a critical care capacity across the organisation during the pandemic. We took them away for a day. We worked with the psychologists from the Resilience Hub, and we offered them an opportunity to both recharge. So we did quite a lot of mindfulness activities with them. And then in the afternoon, there was an opportunity to debrief with a psychologist. And I think we probably had between about 250 and 300 people go through those away days. And the feedback that we have was very well received. People felt that it was a really kind of fantastic opportunity for them to be able to say how they were feeling and to talk through what they'd experienced. So a really good intervention that we've been able to put in place this year. And the final thing is we've spent quite a lot of time as an organisation thinking about how do we develop the right culture. and I guess Suzanne would describe this as being a mission that she's been on since she's been both chief nurse and chief executive within Ashford and St Peters. And I think this year in particular, we've really understood the need to create psychological safety, a culture where people feel safe to speak up, safe to work, and feel that they are listened to and supported by their managers and teams. And that's sort of a really easy thing to summarise, but actually the drivers that then enable you to do that are quite multifaceted. So understanding in the organisation, where are the opportunities for us to improve, where we know that doesn't always happen, be that around civility and respect and how people and teams talk to one another, or be that around a perceived lack of fairness around opportunity and trying to understand what those inclusion issues might be, right through to how do we support people when they are working in really high stress environments, and we know that then has an impact on behaviour and relationships. So quite a significant amount of both diagnostic thinking, but also thinking about what the interventions might be. And there won't be one thing that we will do, but a range of different things, including working with teams who maybe feel that there are some issues in terms of how they function, and working with them to try and build those relationships back up, right through to working with our colleagues around what happens when things go wrong, and how can we make sure that the process that comes out of that has the best outcome for everybody involved. So I suppose those are the things that we've been doing to try and make sure that ambition around culture is something that it actually feels lived by the organisation. So Andy, I'll pause there and obviously take any questions later.
Thank you, Louise. And an immensely important part, the people. If I can just respectfully remind my executive colleagues, there's 5 minutes per strategic objective because we're running a bit over. I'm going to pass on now for 2 objectives worth from Simon.
I'll be quick then, Andy. I mean, the COVID pandemic put massive challenges across the trust, but the way in which we responded to those, particularly in driving more modern healthcare, we must have done 3 years at least change in one last year. Simply, the pandemic broke down barriers across the team. It broke down barriers across the system. Our partnership working improved. I'm sure we'll mention that later. But the willingness of all members of the team to change, to evolve, to drive different pathways, different ways of working, different solutions for patients was simply incredible, really. And we've been really careful to keep all of that and to make sure we can build on those sort of changes, really. Some powerful messages just on this slide. I'll name just a few, but the kind of way we were able to pull behind the infection prevention and control. Lots of changes you can physically see, obviously PPE, but checks temperatures and the like on the front desk, but also a huge amount of changes behind the scenes in terms of air handling units, what we use in theatres, in the new ward that you see in the picture there, the systems we put in there, things like the pop-up ITU were supported. Huge amount of changing across the digital sides of things. We'll mention those in a second. And probably one of the biggest themes was developing our thoughts around the Ashford elective centre and making St Peter's a much more emergency focused kind of hospital, and the split of those changes seriously accelerated over the last 12 or 18 months or so. And then some of the things you've already mentioned, things like car parking at St Peter's, the new catering arrangements, we brought that in-house during the pandemic, and an incredible response to those changes that the in-house team have driven through, really. So, yeah, an incredible year of change, I think, is how I'd summarise the modern healthcare agenda. Onto the digital. Clearly, those ways of working, and we're all on Teams now, aren't we? So, you know, we had to respond very quickly to supporting staff working from home, to supporting patients getting their healthcare from home, and the teams did an amazing job in supporting those changes in very, very quick time. We've also done, as Suzanne was mentioning earlier, we paused slightly our Surrey Safe Care initiative for about 3 months right at the beginning of the pandemic, but ever since then we have been absolutely flying through the launch of that new system. The workforce safety check, that's what Suzanne mentioned earlier, but that was February this year, when we got those 4,000 members of the team to comment and feed in and help us develop that system. That was an incredibly immersive kind of event, all digitally held, but the feedback we got was simply brilliant, and it's put us in really good stead for how that system will be launched in March. That's only 123 days away, so we are now getting very close. Today was a milestone. The build is finished. Basically, we're into the final testing phases with our teams. There'll be more, tweaks as a result of that to the system, but fundamentally it's built. And our training is due to start virtually at the beginning of December, and then classroom-based training from mid-December through to the beginning of March. So some really significant milestones being achieved there as well. And obviously, other things during the pandemic, things like cybersecurity, strengthening our IT platforms and systems has all happened as well to support that. So some amazing changes from that team as well. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Simon. Now going to hand back to Tom for yet another really important strategic objective, which is the collaborate one. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Andy. I mean, that's a good connection from Simon there. I mean, you've heard a lot about collaboration, and collaboration is a key strategic objective for us. But it happens throughout all of our strategy work, and Surrey Safe Care is an incredible example of that. Groundbreaking collaboration between us and the Royal Surrey and Cerner to provide that service to the benefit of patients and our staff. And Louise also talked about our range of collaborations in there. So collaboration isn't something we do in a box. It's not a siloed piece. It's something we do absolutely across the breadth of all of our strategic work, and collaboration is so important. And I think these pictures demonstrate why that's true. I mean, there is so much support out there for us as a trust. And so much potential for us to collaborate with our community to mutual benefit, that we really do need to ensure that we're taking that and supporting each other. And these photographs are just a few examples of that. So you've got there some cards from and those little badges there that the children from some of our local schools put together for us while they were on lockdown, and sent in for us to make us feel better and to give us a boost. You've got the visit there of Sophie Countess of Wessex on the top right-hand corner, which was just after one of the deliveries from Nourish Our Nurses, who are coming into us every week with those amazing bags of fruit and veg that so many of us enjoyed. And the support they gave us was just incredible, and we're so grateful to them for all of that. So we've been thinking hard about how we extend our collaborative approach to to really purposefully benefit our community and give back and to engage with our community. A really important part of that is the development of the North West Surrey Alliance, which we formally signed up to this year, and which Suzanne has mentioned, but you'll hear a little bit more about from Jack Wagstaff later on. And that enables us on a very formal footing to lead and support collaborative work with our local health partners, but also with our borough councils and Surrey County Council. And the work of the borough councils is a really important part of this, because it's all about health and well-being in communities. And we need to ensure that we engage with that, because tackling the wider determinants of health and supporting people's health and well-being and doing that through the existing work and plans of the borough councils is a really key part of that. So we're focusing in across the 4 boroughs that we serve on work that we can develop in Addleston, in Shearwater, Woking, in Staines, and also in Weybridge, and we're looking to work there with the communities and with the borough councils and partners within those areas to support those health and well-being plans in those areas, and to build on what we've already done in terms of putting services out into those communities. And Andy's mentioned the physio services that we've now got in a number of leisure locations across the patch. We've also got community midwifery hubs out there. We're actively supporting the development of one of the first wave community diagnostic hubs in Woking Community Hospital. There's been a number of announcements about those in recent weeks, but we're in there in the first wave, putting diagnostic infrastructure into Woking, and I think we're just on the verge of breaking the ground to put the new kind of high-powered electricity supply into that, so that will support the kit that's going in there in the early part next year. Louise also mentioned the work that we're doing in terms of career development and employment within the local area, and we've been working really closely with some of our local school academies so that we can start to support the development of the curriculum by using the hospital as a tool and a location for learning. And we've got some of our local teachers, heads of science, coming in to have a look at the hospital and bring a kind of pedagogic eye to that, to say how could we use this in the development of the curriculum and delivery of the curriculum for our school kids. And that also enables us to develop ladders through education into training and qualifications, into experience of working in the hospital, and then hopefully into careers and jobs within health and care, which aren't just clinical careers, but they're the breadth of careers across ancillary work. We've already heard about catering. We know about IT, construction, engineering. There's a whole world of careers out there in health and care that we can support, and we're really keen to collaborate very closely with our education partners locally to ensure that our young people have got access to those careers. And then finally, I'll just mention the work that we're seeking to do with the business sector, and we've signed up as partners of Business South, who champion business development in this area. Simon's already mentioned the work that we've done to bring our catering service in-house, and we engaged with Bartlett Mitchell, who are a specialist catering firm that run out of Egham, to help us with all of that. And we're looking for ways in which we can extend our collaboration with the business sector to support them to deliver on corporate social responsibility obligations that they have, and also to support employment prospects and economic well-being within our local area. So there's an awful lot going on. More I could say. I may get the opportunity to say that later, but I know we're short of time, so I'll hand back over to Andy.
Thank you, Tom. So I hope those have given you a good flavour of where we are on our various strategic objectives. Now I know this is the portion that you've all been waiting for. Very, very exciting, but statutorily necessary. Simon is going to take us through the finance report and accounts. Simon.
Thanks for the big build-up, Andy. If you just move on a slide. So I'll let you into a secret. It's not really that hard to be a finance director in a COVID pandemic when the government is pretty much funding everything that the hospital needed. So we were underwritten for the first 6 months and had to live with block contract arrangements for the latter half of the year. But essentially, we were always going to break even at the level the government measures us against. We had some technical adjustments beyond that for impairments on mainly on fixed assets, so the car park, for example, and some of the new builds that we did. But essentially, we broke even for the year, met our financial targets, and although I mean, clearly we didn't make the margins that we made in previous years, but that was the trade-off really with the government, that we would only break even, and we would justify pretty much every penny that we were so generously given during the pandemic, really. But I'll just move on, if I may. In terms of the hospital and our functions, and bearing in mind we shared a lot of services with kind of third parties, so we put teams together, for example, with Central Surrey Health or with BMI down the corridor, or even the Woking Nuffield up the road. And so formally we spent £387 million. That's a substantial increase on previous years, something like 13% and £43 million extra. So that's how much it cost us to run our parts of the system. Clearly the rest of the system was also in receipt of extra monies, and the bulk of all that funding obviously came from the government. Certain other funds like education were maintained, but clearly income such as from car parking reduced significantly, for example, during the year. So that will give you a bit of a feel for the income. On the expenditure, next slide, it really shows where our money went. In the main on staffing. So I think Andy mentioned up front, those extra 18 or so critical care beds took a huge amount of staffing resources to actually to run them and expand them. It doesn't sound like much, does it? But if you can have a team of 9 or 10 behind almost each bed, and hence the funding it requires, and the staff expenditure was extraordinary, really. Clearly, we also spent vast amounts of money on things like personal protective equipment, which is up year on year, but big changes elsewhere. So we didn't outsource as much work as in previous periods, really. And so the mix of our expenditure changed substantially last year, I think it's fair to say. But again, you can see on the graph where that money all went. Just move on one again. So the other side that was absolutely extraordinary was the capital expenditure and the extra equipment and buildings and funding that we were given. I think it was just under 20 million that the government gave us in terms of specific capital allocations. That went on a wide range of things. Clearly in the slides earlier, you saw the urgent and emergency care centre, the assessment units that we've put in there. We've mentioned things like the pop-up ITU, which are on here, theatres investments. So, you know, despite the pandemic, we were still building new theatres in Ashford, obviously things like the car parks as well. At the same time, and starting to look further forward, obviously we've mentioned the Surrey Safe Care, which is a 2-year investment programme initially, and no doubt more years of investment after that. We've got certainly future plans, particularly around the emergency department for a refurbishment, and around maternity for a similar improvements. And all at the same time, we were still doing the normal kind of backlog investments in our estates. We were things like electrical resilience have started to go through, replacement of equipment, you know, IT equipment, again, significant areas of spend. So we spent an absolutely astronomical amount, frankly, on all of that, but have got so much more resilience across all of our systems as a result. And I think, you know, despite those high levels of expenditure and the challenges we'll have in the future, you know, we are in a much stronger place in terms of the delivery of our services and the support that all that investment enables, really. So I'll stop at that point, Andy, but back to you.
Thank you, Simon. And you know, what that doesn't say is the extraordinary amount of work in the background accounting for all this and filling in goodness knows how many returns up the line to justify everything, and the success of bidding for large amounts of money at virtually no notice, which included our ambulatory and patient assessment units, etc., where we got 14 million. So Simon and his department have done extraordinary things, actually, to keep us and give us this level of resilience. So thank you. Now I want to hand over to Jack Wagstaff, and Jack is the place leader and chief officer for the North West Surrey Health and Care Alliance. Jack.
Andy, pleasure, thank you, and real pleasure to speak to everyone this evening. I've been privileged to work closely with and as part of the trust team over the last 18 months on the formation of the North West Surrey Alliance, and this is essentially a comprehensive partnership across all of the organisations you see there, our 4 borough councils across North West Surrey, our GP Federation, CSH, our community services provider, mental health, Woking and Zambia Hospice, the county council. So a really comprehensive partnership of all sorts of organisations involved in the health and well-being of local people, and the simple purpose of that partnership is to think about how do we use our collective resources, our collective aspirations, our collective expertise, our collective talent, our collective assets for the greatest benefit of those local people, and we're increasingly starting to think about this in a newer and more diverse and more holistic way. So actually thinking about what's our impact on society, what's our impact on the environment, and crucially what is our impact in communities. So rather than thinking in a siloed set of disease areas and thinking how are we treating disease A and disease B, actually looking at the needs of the people in Woking, or the people in Staines, or the people in Addlestone, starting to think actually how do we piece together the services we run with actually what's going on in education, what's going on in people's jobs and economic prosperity, what's going on in housing, and actually if we can't use our collective energies to get people good places to live and good jobs and good educational prospects, then people's overall health isn't going to improve, and we're creating the problems that we're seeing that we'll see in the future. And our demand curve all across the board in the NHS in every setting is basically a straight line that goes up, and it's been a straight line that goes up for the last 40 years. So unless we can really start to work together on some of these fundamental societal issues across the board, then we're not going to be able to be sustainable going forward. So our work as a partnership is crucial to that aspiration. Have the next slide, please. So what do we do? We're setting three fundamentally key goals. I think first is around delivering high quality services across our partnership, and this is a real opportunity to streamline and make as effective as possible everything that we do, to minimise handoffs between our organisations, to create teams that work effectively together and are able to look after the totality and support the totality of people's needs. Being able to eliminate inequality. I think there's a 14-year life expectancy in North West Surrey between North Weybridge and North Walton, which are a 15-minute drive away. And unless we're much more sophisticated in starting to intervene and starting to work with communities in a much more granular, much more different way, actually the health of our population isn't going to improve, or it will improve while leaving big other segments of the population behind, and that's absolutely not acceptable in a modern health economy. And also the sustainability of our services, and again in the broadest sense, making sure that we're fit for the future in terms of being able to respond to changing needs, to respond to the levels of demand that we're seeing, to respond to the changing agendas around the environment and our broader impact there, to be as efficient as possible so we can continue to work within our resources. And all of these challenges are much better faced when we come together as a group of organisations to consider them, rather than working in our individual silos. I think what's been really powerful for me is the change in mindset across the partnership over the last 2 years, and Ashford and St Peters have driven a lot of that with the tone of the trust, the progressive nature, the ability to look outside of the four walls of the hospital and recognise the impact of the trust as an anchor institution, and that's built a different level of trust that actually has allowed people to be more open with their challenges, their priorities, the things they're finding difficult, the things they need to overcome, and it's allowed us to respond to some of the huge challenges that we've seen over the last 18 months much more effectively. And I think that will be brought to life a little bit in the next slide. So I think some of the things we've done, even, and I think colleagues have mentioned a lot of this. I'm going to pick out a few, but all of these developments have been built on organisations coming together to deliver really quite inspirational things. So we've worked really closely with some of our communities across the patch, in Shearwater, in Staines, in Addlestone, in Weybridge. In Staines in particular, we're looking at a really significant new development that brings health services out into the community alongside business developments, education, retail, leisure and culture, and a new housing development. So really starting to have a broader and a bigger impact on some of our key communities across the patch. We're starting to make different sorts of decisions with traditional health resources. So we invested £300,000 in different sorts of housing accommodation across the course of the year, and that allowed people to escape domestic violence, to deal with really challenging mental health situations in a safe place. It allowed people who were on the verge of becoming homeless to go to a safe place while they sorted out their some legal disputes and eviction cases and all sorts of things that really enable people to get their life back on track in a way that didn't have a huge reliance on health services and other public services. And this is the sort of different sort of lens that we need to start to think through in terms of people's overall need. I think colleagues mentioned the vaccination programme earlier on, and the mobilisation of our community vaccination programme was a huge partnership effort all across the Alliance. It relied on buildings and infrastructure provided by our borough councils, staff coming from Ashford and St Peters, from CSH, from primary care, over 400 volunteers. When the equipment all didn't turn up on day one, screens were rapidly sourced from Woking and Sambir Hospice. Simon drove round some equipment from the hospital in his own car in a faster response time than Amazon Prime. So it was a real example of a partnership coming together to deploy one of the most successful logistical and clinical efforts of our time. And there are literally hundreds of people across Surrey who will see the birth of their granddaughter, or will be able to ask what their son did at school the next day because of the efforts of those organisations coming together. So I think the efforts of our teams over that time has been incredibly inspirational. I'll pull out a couple of the other in terms of some of the work we've done to collaborate much more closely on our health service delivery. I think Andrea mentioned the work around the discharge functions, and actually starting to bring single teams together that join up the therapy teams in the hospital with our community teams and our community hospitals with our social care teams across the county as well, and starting to bring those together as one team that again is able to respond to the holistic needs of people coming out of hospital. We have a shared medical team now operating across our Woking and Sambir Hospice and Ashford and St Peters that is allowing people to transfer much more quickly and under much more robust and clear clinical supervision, that's allowing people to die with their families in the most comfortable environment. And these things make a real difference to the experience of our of people and families across our area. So it's a huge amount that's been delivered in the space of a year, and I think this is the foundation that we can really start to build upon as we go into next year as well. So I can't tell Andy whether I've been hopeless at sticking to time there or not, but I think I'm handing back to you now.
Thank you, Jack, and thanks for that gamble around the Alliance, really being very, very effective, I think, for our population. So now, one of the most important things we've got to think about right now, and you've all looked at the press, is staying safe this winter. So I'm going to hand over now to Andrea to talk about the infection prevention and control and how you can do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I think the first slide, actually, we've got a couple of things, 3 slides just to cover off, obviously to give a COVID update as to where we're at currently, actually, and then how we can stay safe this winter, it's really important, and our infection prevention control update, really, which we've had quite a key strategy around that as a trust, which has been really effective, I'm glad to say. So this slide is just to illustrate, you can see the cases, it maps from the end of September, actually, to where we are now. And you can see that it's good to see that we're on a downward trajectory. The arrows are all pointing down, which is good. We haven't seen that clearly over the last few weeks. It has been quite challenging, and certainly since we last presented, we've had the second wave, which was back in January, beginning of February, and as Suzanne already said, I don't really remember much of that time either. It's quite intense. I felt far worse than the first wave, actually. And then we saw a bit of a third wave in the summer months. And then it's been grumbling along, I'd have to say, really, since August, of cases dropping and then increasing. And that's very much from an inpatient COVID positive perspective. And at the beginning of October, we did see cases reduce, and they've spiked up now. We pretty much have a full ward of COVID positive cases of patients that are within our organisation. So the so what of that is that COVID is very much ever present within our community. And although we've got the vaccination process underway and the booster, which is super, that the vaccination programme has definitely has had an impact on the number of inpatients that we've had within the organisation since we've had the second vaccination. And having the booster now is really important, I think, to be able for us to get through winter as safely as we possibly can. Can I have the next slide, please? But there are other measures, actually, that we need to take on board in order to keep safe. It's not just all about the vaccination process, which clearly is about that immunity. But we know we're going to be in for a very challenging winter because we've got the COVID, clearly, that's present, but also we've got normal flu cases, which we didn't see really last winter, but we are starting to see this winter. And then we've also got RSV, which you can see on the screen there, the respiratory syncytial virus, which is very much a virus that affects children, particularly babies under 2 months and infants. And nationally, we're starting to see cases of that appear, which we hadn't seen the last winter because of the lockdowns that have been in place and children being exposed. So all of that in the mix really presents, it does present a picture that could really be challenging. And these are infections, so it's about really adopting the principles of being able to keep safe and reducing transmission, which I've already mentioned about the vaccination, but it is about fresh air, and where you can ventilate areas, do so. And obviously we have got good filtration within the hospital, as Simon's mentioned, with the HEPA filtration, but also at home it is about keeping areas as ventilated as possible. I know it's a bit challenging in winter, but it is really key. It is about wearing a face covering in crowded spaces or in transport, and I know it's a personal responsibility now when you're outside as to what you want to do. If you want, when going into supermarkets, about wearing a face mask. But I think, personally, I've just maintained those measures. I think, it's just a very easy measure to do in order to keep safe. It's about testing regularly with the lateral flow that we have, and also the PCR as well. Really effective means to pick up if somebody is positive. And if you are unwell, it's about staying at home. Or if you've been in contact with somebody that's COVID positive, it's about self-isolating and keeping those principles very much in play. And the most effective means of breaking infection chain is washing hands. You can't do enough of it, and it's the first priority really around IPC, as I said, to break that infection chain. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to mention really about our infection prevention control, because although I've just mentioned about those measures that are really effective, we've had a really strict infection prevention control strategy in place within the hospital. I did mention it at our last meeting last year, and you can see there what that infection prevention and control strategy is all about. It's about minimising human density, which we've done obviously through restricted visiting, the IPC precautions, about effective decontamination. That's really the good cleaning that we've had in the hospital, and then providing a safe environment, and that's having our different pathways for our patients, green pathway for patients going to Ashford for the elective, and the urgent side, the non-elective cases coming through St. Peter's, and that has been really effective. And I have to say, the staff have been incredibly have been fantastic in adhering to this. So much so, and also the public as well, so much so that we are in the top 10 of trusts who have had the lowest amount of hospital-acquired COVID cases, which, you know, is I say top 10. It's incredible, really, and is really down to the super work that that the staff have done. But we can't rest on our laurels, and we can't relax, because, as I said, COVID is still there, and other infections are out there that are really present a real risk to us. But I'm confident with the strategy that we've had in place. It's proven to be effective, that we can keep battling on with that. So I think that's all I'll say on that, Andy, really. And I'll hand on to James. Yes.
Thank you. Just before James takes over, you'll recall that I said one of the impacts of COVID obviously was the amount of day surgery that went down and elective surgery that went down. So I'm sure you'll be really interested to know how we are planning and how we are recovering those waiting lists, which obviously affects so many people across the community. So with that, I'm going to hand over to James.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. So my first slide is just a graph that the important part from this graph is just to show how many people are waiting in our organisation for treatment now compared to before COVID. So the line shows that before COVID, which is the very start of the graph, that we had about 27,500 patients waiting for treatment of some description. They're on our waiting list in the organisation. And you can see that that line decreased as we went into COVID, because people weren't going to primary care. We weren't getting the referrals into the organisation, so our waiting list wasn't growing. We were still seeing some patients virtually. That's why our waiting list fell. But you can see that after the first wave peak, our waiting list has continued to increase up to the high that you can see in September, around just around 32,500 patients. So 5,000 patients above where we were before COVID come to us. So that's a significant amount of more work that we have, and a significant number of more patients that we need to keep safe while they're waiting for their treatment with us. And that's really our driver around our restoration, is keeping our patients safe, keeping these patients safe who are waiting for surgery with us, for a lot more of them and a lot longer than they would have done before COVID. Have my next slide, please. So here are a few things that we've done. Before COVID, we were looking to line up Ashford as our elective centre. What we really wanted to do was disentangle the elective and non-elective pathways at St Peter's, so that they weren't compromised and they weren't clashing. Through the winter especially, it's very to run elective and urgent services on one site is very difficult. So at St Peter's, we're dedicated our red site, and we've got Ashford, what we can dedicate to our green elective site, as a number of colleagues have said during this evening already. So we created Elliot Ward at Ashford. That opened earlier this year, and that's an important part of Ashford being our elective centre. It's our inpatient surgical ward. So we did inpatient orthopaedics at Ashford, but we didn't do anything else. So we opened a new ward, and we launched our inpatient surgery activities. So that's colorectal, urology, gynecology and general surgery that we're doing as inpatients at Ashford in our new ward there. And you see our enhanced care unit. So this is a special unit, a 4-bedded unit within Elliot, that provides a higher level of care than a normal ward bed, so that we can cater for more patients at the Ashford site. We've got an enhanced facility there. It's not a HDU or an ITU, but it's a bit more support than a normal ward, so we can cater for some of our slightly more complex patients. And that opened again in this year. Next slide, please. Another thing that we did at Ashford, we have invested, as colleagues have said this evening, in facilities at Ashford. And one of the things that we invested in is this facility that you can see. It's our modular elective theatres that we have. We have two modular theatres at Ashford that we invested in. We've been able to dedicate them to ophthalmology at the moment, and you can see they are state-of-the-art theatres, and that's enabled us to have more theatre capacity overall at Ashford and dedicate this facility to our ophthalmology patients, which has enabled an increase of number of patients that we can see both in ophthalmology but also in generally through our theatres at Ashford. Another thing that we've done actually prior to COVID we lined up was our investment in the number of theatres in our main complex at Ashford. And these photos are photos of our new theatre at Ashford. So we built Theatre 6. So we moved things around, we moved space around at Ashford, and we built a new theatre in our main complex, which is Theatre 6. So that's this theatre here. Now, we have been slightly unfortunate. We have a theatre out of action at the moment. So we have got a theatre down. But you know, overall, we have the facilities at Ashford that are better than they've ever been before. And it's enabled us to provide more capacity for our patients at Ashford, where we can guarantee that they're on a green site without COVID, and we can also guarantee that their operations won't get cancelled on the day due to urgent care pressures. So two really, really important reasons why Ashford is so fundamentally important to our recovery. And you can start seeing the impact here. So this graph, it doesn't really matter, just follow the line with the dots on it, the line with the grey dots. You can see that there's an orange dot. That just shows that this graph just shows how many outpatients we were seeing at Ashford and St Peter's prior to COVID, and then during COVID and afterwards. And you can see that prior to COVID, we were seeing somewhere around between 32 and 37,000 patients a month. That fell during COVID, but during October, where we've really been stepping up our activities, we saw 42,197 patients. So that is the most patients that have ever been seen, the most outpatients that have ever been seen at Ashford and St Peter's was last month. So, you know, our activities to increase the number of patients that we can see and therefore begin to reduce down the waiting time again for our patients and the number of patients waiting totally is really beginning to bite. So a really impressive month last month that we were able to run the most outpatient consultations that this organisation has ever seen in 1 month. And this is just a few of the measures that we're taking to ensure that we can do these things, because it is extraordinary times. Running restoration and running these services as an organisation is harder than was been running through COVID. So we've got a lot more on and a lot more coming at us now. So these are the things that we're doing to ensure that we can work through our restoration agenda. Moving things to Ashford, we had a new theatre timetable. We've appointed some new theatre teams. Some of the theatre teams from St Peter's have moved over to Ashford. We're doing operations at Ashford that we weren't doing. We were doing at St Peter's previously. We've moved kit across. We've had to move consultants' timetables. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot there that we need to bed in. So theatre utilisation and working on our efficiency has been really important. We're working with a company at the moment who've worked across all organisations, all hospitals in our area, actually. We've spent time with them, and they've helped us pull together a plan around improving our theatre utilisation and our efficiency. So getting more patients through our existing resource. So it's not about doing more hours or more. This is just about using our services efficiently and our theatres efficiently so we can get more people through the ordinary hours of the day. The second thing we've done is looking to maximise our internal capacity. So we have our theatres available at the weekends, and we aren't currently staffed to run them, but we do run weekend theatres where we can, you know, to provide more capacity. So we've got we have at least 3 theatres running on a Saturday and a Sunday all through November, and we've been trying to do that since before the summer. It was tougher during the summer, but it's getting back at a pace again now. We've got locums that we've been able to take in a number of specialties so that we've got greater ability to pick up theatre lists when colleagues are on holiday, and we're running outpatient clinics at evenings and weekends, and we're backfilling with our locums as well, so we're not dropping capacity either in outpatients or theatres when people are away. So we look, and also in terms of diagnostics, we're doing the same. We're running diagnostics in the evenings and weekends at Ashford. We're running the CT. So a lot of things that we're trying to do to get the most of out of our internal systems as well. Insourcing and outsourcing. Insourcing is something that has become more available to us in recent times, but we've really grasped this concept. This is independent sector providers, professional providers who can come into our organisation and work with us to provide services for our patients. So we currently work with 2 insourcing providers across 5 specialties in the organisation, and across every week we have 500 appointments delivered additionally within our hospital through this insourcing model, through this working with these partners. And through outsourcing, that's where we use independent sector providers who run their own hospitals and own premises. We're currently working with 5 independent sector providers in their premises across 8 specialties in the organisation to provide more operations and diagnostic capacity for our patients. Collaboratively, we've got the endoscopy unit at Ashford, which is run by a private provider, and we have examples of where we've tried to help neighbouring providers. So a small amount of ophthalmology patients we've taken who have been waiting a long time at a neighbouring trust, we've tried to support them as well. We've also been able to invest in some equipment to enable us to do things more innovatively. And one example of that is ophthalmology at Ashford, where we've invested in digital surveillance equipment, so we can have patients go for a whole range of diagnostics in one go, and then only be seen by a consultant that those need to be seen, so they can be triaged appropriately through this new exciting equipment. And we can see 100 extra patients a week at least through this new pathway. So that's just a taste of some of the things of how some of the challenges we've got in terms of restoration, and some of the actions that we're taking to rise to that particular challenge.
Thank you, James. That's all very clear, and obviously got questions for James. Now it comes to a very bittersweet part that I've got to do, actually, because for those of you who don't know, Suzanne is moving on to pastures new at the beginning of February, so she'll be leaving us at the end of January, and has got a very exciting new job looking after the people of Cardiff and the Vale, so in the best country in the world. Not that I'm a Welsh woman, of course, but it's a really exciting opportunity, and we love to export people who have grown significantly with the trust. That said, I just want to pay immense tribute to Suzanne and what she has done here. The fact that we are recognised throughout the system as probably the most collaborative trust, the culture that she has built here has been phenomenal, and the results over 11 years of effort, 4 years as chief nurse, and will be 7 years as the chief executive, is just phenomenal. And I personally feel privileged 4 years as the chairman to have worked with her. I just wanted to take this opportunity, as it's her last annual members meeting, to say farewell to Suzanne and thank you, a real big thank you on behalf of all the members, actually, all those on the call and those who aren't, and all those 410,000 people in the community that you have served so well. So thank you, Suzanne, for that. And so let's move on. We are very happy to take questions. So first of all, have we got any written questions submitted in advance? Anu, I guess.
No, Andy, there weren't any questions in advance.
Okay. There were a couple of questions where I noticed in the chat. One, Suzanne has answered about the vaccination rate for our staff. Over, I think it was 90.6% last time I looked. And by the time you add those who clinically, for one reason or another, can't take a vaccination, then actually we are amongst the best trusts in the country for that. So we are very proud of that. Not every single person has had a vaccination that could have, but the overwhelming majority have, and have been delighted to do so, because if we go back to what Andrea was saying, of course, this helps protect people when they're at their most vulnerable, when they're in hospital. So that's really, really important. And the other one, Anu, how are we making the slides available?
We can make them available. I can send a special message to the members, and we can also make them available on our website. Okay.
So Mark, I think you asked about that. So we'll be delighted to do that, of course. So I don't think I saw any more questions in the chat, but did I miss anything? I think there's one here actually. Just, can you take the booster jab 10 days early? I think that's a policy type question. Suzanne, I don't think we.
I think probably I think probably no, but I would suggest it would depend on the context and the reason for wanting it 10 days early, and that would be a discussion with your clinician.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because next Wednesday I'm due to go to St. Thomas's for an epilepsy checkup, and my booster jab is due 10 days later. So I can't see the point of traveling to St. Thomas's twice in less than 2 weeks. So that's why I was asking.
Do you have your booster at St. Thomas's?
Yeah.
Well,
because
why
I'm a
don't you have it
patient.
with us, or more locally? I'm sure we can arrange that. We can share with you the details of local. Well, you can. There's walk-in opportunity now, isn't there, Jack? So I really don't think you should have to travel to St. Thomas's to have your third dose. But I don't think going for your checkup would be a reason for giving you your dose early. Would be my view. But I'm not an administrating clinician.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, understood. We've got walk-in available, haven't we, Jack? Locally.
We have. I think we've got 4 sites live across in each of our boroughs, so easily accessible, and more than happy to share the details with colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Stephen, yes, I see that what you've said, but we do have to emphasise that 9.4% gap, quite a lot of that is taken up with people who can't have the jab for clinical reasons. So, but what we will do is we will enforce the policy, whatever that policy is, and actually we support that policy. To be very clear, patients are at their most vulnerable when they're in hospital for whatever reason. And we do support the fact that NHS staff, if they can be vaccinated, should be vaccinated. But we've got to make clear that not everybody can be vaccinated. Suzanne, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's absolutely right, Andy. I mean, the only thing we would do is obviously work between now and implementation of the policy, in the knowledge that the policy is coming, with those 1 or 2 colleagues who have been reluctant for whatever reason, and encourage them to take up that opportunity before we get to the point of enforcement, or even worse, they have to necessarily leave the organisation or be redeployed in some way. So clearly we will take that opportunity, but I think Andy makes a good point. It's not a 10% gap. The vast majority of those colleagues can't actually have the vaccination for a clinical reason.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne, for that. If anybody else wants to ask a question live, then please put the yellow hand up if you can. Be delighted to answer questions on anything we've said, or indeed things we haven't said. Your members' meeting. Nope, there's oops. Sorry, my Teams is playing up at the moment.
There is a question in the chat, Chairman.
Yes.
What is the Trust doing to support diversity, especially at senior management level?
Okay, so I'll pass it on to Louise actually in a moment, but just to say that at board level, we have recently increased our diversity, and we've had 2 BAME colleagues join the board. One is a GP, Dami, who actually currently is on maternity leave, given birth to a lovely baby boy, and Aaron, who is the Managing Director of Bupa Clinics, has also joined us. So we have increased our diversity, not enough at board level at the moment, but a start. But we've done a lot of work at the trust level and at the emerging colleagues who are emerging into senior management level, and I'll pass it on to Louise.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and as Andy has just described, actually, if you think about the broader leadership team, and we have done quite a significant investment in our divisional leadership over the last 12 months. So we have 6 divisions, all of whom have operations director, clinical director, and a divisional chief nurse or allied health professional. And actually, if you look at the diversity of that group from a gender perspective, from an ethnic minority point of view, actually, we have quite a broad range of people who have been successful, mostly in terms of internal talent and promotion, which is brilliant. So that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see more people having opportunities to have development and be able to step up. And certainly Andrea and her team have done quite a lot of work within the nursing community around identifying the next generation of matrons and making sure that there's some support put in place for those colleagues, and in particular identifying with our overseas nurses what their aspirations are for their careers. So having career conversations with people to talk about what is the process with which you would need to follow if you were interested in being developed and then being appointed to that next level. Because quite often it's about encouraging people to participate in activities that will help to stretch and develop them, and signposting them to opportunities to apply for promotion. And to that end, we've also, over the last 12 months, implemented a mentoring scheme for our ethnic minority colleagues. So if they want to have a mentor, so they've got a bit more of a one-on-one time to understand what those opportunities are, then we've been able to match them up with a mentor. I spoke earlier about the culture improvement programme. And for me, one of those issues is to really understand the reason why people are not proportionately within our senior makeup if they do come from, for example, an ethnic minority, and really try and understand why that is and what we can do to improve our recruitment practices, make sure that there's no issues that occur as a result of how we recruit, but also that piece around development and support for people going through any kind of a development and selection process. So I hope that sort of gives an answer. It might be a generic answer, but I think we're conscious of the fact that there is a disparity, and we are looking to try and address that through development and support.
Thank you, Louise. And we're not quite going to let you off the hook yet. Another question come in, which I think is around how we address how we have been indeed addressing, and quite successfully, I know you'll say, the shortage of nurses and medical staff. And some of that, of course, is at system level rather than just at trust level. So we can no longer look just at the trust, because pinching people from next door doesn't actually help the health and well-being of the community. But Louise.
Yeah, so we continue to have both active UK recruitment campaign to attract doctors and nurses and other professional groups, because we are short of radiographers, we're short of physiotherapists, we're short in other areas. So we have both an active UK recruitment campaign, but also continue to look overseas, and that is a pipeline of the workforce that has been successful for us. Not just within our nursing workforce, but also within our medical workforce, and a lot of work in Kerala in India to support people coming over and working with us, in some cases for a fixed amount of time, so that they can then take that training and that experience back to their home country, because we're very conscious of wanting to not create problems elsewhere. I described a bit earlier the innovative approaches that we're trying to take to recruitment, and as Andy has said, that also includes attracting people who haven't thought about the caring profession into the profession, and we've seen that we've been really successful in doing that through things like the Recruitment Hub, but also coming together with colleagues in other health and social care organisations. And actually today I attended an event where we were looking at how we address the issues around community nursing. And I don't employ any community nurses, but actually the impact of the massive gaps of community nursing in our community and primary care organisations has a significant impact on Ashford and St Peters, in terms of us being able to discharge our patients, knowing that they will get that level of support that they need in the community. So working together to try and understand what the issues are and how we might be able to resolve them together, making jobs more attractive by working together, I think is also a key part of it.
Sorry, thank you. We've seen our vacancy rate really come down, haven't we? But to the community thing, what has happened, of course, because we've been able to successfully recruit overseas nurses, and overseas nurses working alone in the community, which often community nurses are, is a much more difficult sell. And I'm personally delighted with my other hat on as well, as chair of CSH, to see that community nursing as a system, we're looking at this. There's a question come up, thank you, Simon, around the stroke pathway. I was wondering, Suzanne, if you could address that one.
I mean, Simon, you will know how challenging that work was if you were familiar with it. I mean, certainly the stroke pathway is operational within the organisation. The HAZU is operating, and we have a pathway for rehabilitation to Woking Community Hospital, and also out to Ashford here, where I am this evening. So I think it is operational. What I would say is, I think the level of commitment across the system to bind together around a whole system collaboration to deliver on this piece of work was always quite challenging. And I suspect there are elements to that haven't been fully realised. I think in addition to that, we've now, emerging data, new healthcare technologies, so increasing opportunities for thrombolectomy, which was clearly a specialist intervention and probably will be done at tertiary centre, is actually leading to the thinking that there needs to be a further iteration of all of that work and a further system level review of those pathways. So I'm inclined to agree with you to some extent, and I think there is certainly more work that should be done around that. And I think in the context of some of the things that Tom spoke about earlier, and the new infrastructure, the emerging ICS and health and care partnership will present some opportunities through the provider collaborations, which are now being mandated, as you will probably know if you're working in the NHS. So hopefully that answers your question. So it certainly wasn't all to waste. Lots of good work and lots of good patient care, but more to do around that pathway, I would suggest. I don't know if James or Tom, I can see Tom's nodding away, want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's right. The only bit I would add possibly is, and I don't know which organisation you represent, Simon, but there was quite a key component of the recovery pathway in the model that was implemented that involved the Stroke Association were quite heavily involved in that, and I think there's elements of that I agree with you. I haven't seen live in the community, and maybe it's that bit that you're referring to. But I think, as Suzanne says, I think the opportunities that we've got now for collaboration, particularly with some of those charities and voluntary sector organisations, is really substantial, and is a really good footing to develop that. But things are changing with stroke. The model of rehabilitation, the model of treatment is changing. So we need to make sure that we're involved in those changes and involved in implementing them, and working with the right organisations to get those services to patients.
Thank you, Tom. I'll take the next question, which is around Associate NED, and thank you for asking this, Stephen. So NHS England does have a programme where they put forward NEDs, normally from an ethnic minority background, who perhaps aren't ready for the board, but need board experience, because the trouble with non-executives in particular is, unless you've got non-executive experience, it's quite hard to get a board position. But if you've had board experience as an associate NED, then that's a lot easier. And we took on a lady called Yvonne under that scheme, and as it happened, when her year came to an end, we didn't have a vacancy at that point, but actually she has gone on to be a non-executive elsewhere. So it was successful, and indeed Aaron came to us through an associate route, because when we interviewed for a clinical NED, both Dami and Aaron were actually very good, and we wanted them both, and we knew somebody was coming up. So actually, yeah, thank you, Pauline. Right, using Simon's account. So we actually took Aaron on as an associate. Now, what is an associate? They don't have voting rights on the board, but they actually act as a in all other ways. They act as a non-executive. And actually, I can't think of the last time we actually had a vote at our board. I'm sure we must have, but I can't think of it. It's not a common occurrence. We're a very collaborative board, so it gets them the experience. And indeed, at the moment, we're going to recruit an associate, Ned, because in July next year, one of our senior independent director, Merrick Peavers, is due to come off, having finished his time. And we thought it was a very good thing to do to recruit an associate that could shadow him for 6 months, and subject to satisfactory performance, we would then take on that associate non-executive. So that's what the only difference is. The associate non-executive director doesn't have voting rights. So hopefully that's it. Now we're about 3 minutes to go, so chance to one last question. So I think that's Anthony. I think you're going to say, if I had the AstraZeneca jab, what would my booster jab be? So I think nearly all the booster jabs are Pfizer, but I'll defer to my clinical colleagues. Is that right?
I don't honestly know, Andy. I've not been administrating the booster, so to be honest, I'm a bit loath to comment on a clinical piece like that without knowing Anthony very well, or what our current practice is. I mean, we've all had Pfizer, but I had Pfizer for my first dose, so I don't know.
We don't absolutely know, but we think it's Pfizer at the moment, but you will definitely find out when you go, but we can't absolutely say. Certainly all the booster jabs we've been administering in the hospital have been Pfizer.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a lot to choose between them in terms of efficacy or combination of effects. So in terms of the benefit for you, I think you can be confident that either vaccination that you get will provide you with an enhancement to immunity.
Okay, so look, it's nearly 7 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for, number one, for spending time with us this evening. We've been delighted to actually present what the last year has been about, and indeed what is going on now to recover services. As Suzanne, I think, said, we've had a fantastic few days actually handing out COVID star medals and yearbooks to our staff as a token of appreciation, and that has gone down extremely well with an exhausted workforce, both emotionally and physically. So we're all supporting them at the moment. But thank you ever so much for your questions as well, really, and your support, because as was said earlier, the support we've had from the community over the past 18 months has been extraordinary. From the people bringing in fruit and veg, donations, charitable donations. We've had some unbelievable donations. An individual, for example, donated £35,000 for gym equipment for our health and wellbeing centre. And no matter how wealthy you are, that is a phenomenally generous gesture. But all donations, great and small, have been gratefully received, whether they've been in chocolates, in fruit and veg, in money, and we have really appreciated the support of you, our community. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention tonight. Thank you for all the speakers for your time and efforts on this, and thank you to the comms team and the governance team for all the hard work behind the scenes on the slides, etc. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Good night.